"That is not her signature," my aunt said, sliding a fingerprint report across the conference table. "And if you try to close at 4 p.m., I will have a judge on Zoom by 3:30. My name is Lena Park. I am 36, founder and CEO of WillowWorks, a logistics software company that grew out of a cramped sublease at 38 Essex Street. The day that changed everything was March 3, 2025, when I did not show up for my 7 a.m. product stand-up because I was in a coma after a hit-and-run near mile marker 22. Before I get to the coma, you need to understand the pattern. Scams do not happen all at once. They warm up first. 2 summers ago, I opened the petty cash drawer during a heat wave. The office smelled like burned dust from the old AC. I counted $2,800, but the ledger said $4,000. When I asked our operations lead, Evan, he laughed and said, "Vendor tips, like gratuities explained a missing $1,200. I wrote the date, August 17, 2023, in my leather notebook and underlined it twice. On January 9, 2024, the sprinkler inspection failed. The inspector's tag hung wet on the pipe like a warning. Evan had signed the work order, then let it lapse. He shrugged under the red exit sign and said, "It is only fines." We paid $400 and I started keeping copies of everything in a red accordion folder labeled receipts. Last fall, a potential buyer named Port Atlas asked for a revenue breakdown. I sent a clean spreadsheet. Evan forwarded a different file to them at 10:32 p.m. with inflated ARR by 40%. I caught it because their analyst replied to both versions. Evan said, "They want a story, give them a story." I moved him off client communications and logged the switch. On March 3, 2025, I left the office at 6:18 a.m. in the dark drizzle. I remember a horn, the sick thump of metal, then waking to a white ceiling that hummed. I was told later that I was intubated by 7:12 a.m., sedated at St. Luke's ICU bed 19. My phone filled with 47 missed calls. My body felt heavy like a wet coat I could not pull off. Here is what happened while I slept. Evan scheduled a special board meeting for March 4th at 8 a.m. He said I had signed a consent to sell WillowWorks for $9 million to Port Atlas, with closing set for March 7th at 4 p.m. He emailed a PDF named Consent LP 030325. PDF. He wrote, "Lena authorized this before her accident." He CC'd our 2 angel investors and our counsel, but sent counsel a different PDF without the signature page. He was careful. Just not careful enough. My aunt, Sumi Park, is a nurse who raised me when my mom worked nights. She is 62 and never bluffs. A year earlier, after that inflated revenue stunt, I signed a durable power of attorney naming Aunt Sumi for medical and limited business authority if I was incapacitated. We had it notarized at the UPS store on Avenue A, notarization number 086372, witness signatures Priya Shah and Marco Diaz. We filed a copy with our corporate attorney's office. That paper is why I can tell this story. At 9:14 a.m. on March 3rd, while I was still on a ventilator, the hospital called the emergency contact listed on my phone. Aunt Sumi showed up wearing her navy scrubs. She tucked my leather notebook under her arm like it was a shield. When she learned I was incapacitated, she pulled her copy of the power of attorney from a clear sleeve and had the charge nurse certify it in my chart. "I am her agent until she wakes," she said. "Document that." She called my attorney, Priya Shah, at 10:06 a.m. and said, "Check the corporate calendar. Someone is moving." Priya accessed our board portal and saw the special meeting. The invite said, "Discuss continuity. Execute pre-signed consent." Priya replied to all, "No consent exists. Send page references for the alleged document." At 11:22 a.m., Evan sent a scanned signature page with my name. The loop on the P in Park was wrong. The timestamp metadata said it was created at 9:48 a.m. on March 3 in preview on a MacBook. He forgot to flatten the layers. Priya called him. "Where did you get this page?" she asked. He said, "She signed it last week." Priya said, "Send the original wet ink page and the notary certification." He hung up and sent a photo where a notary seal looked like it had been dragged with a finger. The notary name was spelled Marina with 2 R's. Our real notary is Marina. The insult that broke the spell for everyone was a message Evan sent to the leadership group chat at 12:01 p.m. This is bigger than Lena. We have to be pragmatic. He attached a draft press release with my name, thanking Port Atlas for shepherding our vision. He scheduled it for 4:30 p.m. on March 7th. He thought the words would lull everyone. He did not see the anger he had just woken up. We called our response Operation Wake First. Aunt Sumi named it at 1:20 p.m., leaning over my hospital bed. She read me the plan as if I could hear her, because the nurse said hearing is the last thing to go. The steps were simple and brutal. Notify the bank. Notify the board. Notify the state. Lock the doors. Document everything. By 2 p.m. Priya drafted a cease and desist on her letterhead. It cited New York Business Corporation law and demanded Evan preserve all documents. It warned that any transfer of shares without my valid consent would trigger injunctive relief. She CC'd Port Atlas, their general counsel, and a partner at the escrow firm, Adler and Shaw, with the subject line, Injunction imminent if unauthorized sale proceeds. At 3:07 p.m., Aunt Sumi walked into Willow Works with my red accordion folder. She had a printout of the power of attorney, the ICU attending note, and a list in her tidy handwriting. Freeze corporate accounts. Remove admin rights. Swap locks, she said to our receptionist. Hi, I'm Lena's aunt. We are not closing today. The receptionist reached for the phone. Aunt Sumi smiled and slid over a hospital stamp. This is not a debate. The ally truth teller arrived from an unexpected corner. Our 19-year-old intern, Kiana, came in from the kitchen clutching a sleeve of paper cups. She whispered to me later that the air smelled like burned coffee and nerves. She looked at Aunt Sumi and said, If they sell it, he gets rich and we all get laid off, right? Aunt Sumi nodded. Kiana walked to the center of the bullpen and said, If your name is not Park or Shaw, you do not speak to strangers about the company today. It landed like a bell. At 4:21 p.m., Priya emailed the board with 3 attachments. Exhibit A was the notarized power of attorney dated May 12, 2024. Exhibit B was the hospital's attending physician letter that I was incapacitated as of March 3 at 7:12 a.m. Exhibit C was a forensic review from a service called Penmark that circled 3 inconsistencies in the forged signature. The subject line read, No valid shareholder consent. Do not proceed, Evan replied at 4:33 p.m. This is hostile. Lena would want liquidity. He copied Port Atlas's vice president of corporate development, a man named Jason Cole. Jason wrote at 4:37 p.m. We rely on your representation that you have authority. Priya hit reply all. You do not. A temporary restraining order will be filed at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you continue, you will be named. Jason did not reply. Evan did. You are overplaying your hand. The temperature in the thread dropped 10 degrees. The next morning at 8:46 a.m., Judge Morales signed a 9-page temporary restraining order. Case Index 450319, 2025. Enjoining any sale or transfer of Willow Works shares without my written notarized consent. This order is effective upon service, the judge said on the Zoom line. You may not act. That sentence pulled a thread that would unravel the rest. At 10 a.m., Priya and Aunt Sumi served the TRO on Port Atlas at their glass building at 580 Lexington Avenue. The security guard said the elevators were card access only. Priya held up the stamped order. Then you can run it upstairs, she said. He did. They served Evan in our boardroom at 11:12 a.m. He read line 3 twice. His mouth did a thing like he had tasted soap. He said, You cannot do this without Lena. Aunt Sumi said, I am Lena today. The paper says so. At noon, they took Evan's laptop. Our IT contractor, Mateo, cloned the hard drive. He found the PDF creation logs, a folder named Signatures, and a draft resignation letter that ended with sincerely and no name. He also found a WhatsApp chat with Jason from Port Atlas. On March 2nd at 10:58 p.m., Jason wrote, "We need her sign-off." Evan wrote, "Handled." The screen capture became Exhibit D. At 2 p.m., Priya and Aunt Sumi went to the bank. The manager at First Republic on Bowery asked for identification and the corporate resolution. Priya slid the power of attorney across the desk and the TRO. The manager read the stamp, the judge's signature, and stood up to get her supervisor. "We will freeze all non-payroll transfers until court lifts the order," the supervisor said. "That includes escrow." Payroll ran on time. Everything else stopped cold. By March 6th, 3 things happened in parallel. The hospital began trying to lighten my sedation. The police forgery unit, Shield number 4178, took a report for forgery in the 2nd degree and criminal possession of a forged instrument. And Port Atlas sent a notice purporting to terminate their offer and reserve their rights. It sounded like a door slamming. It was actually a retreat. On March 7th at 3:58 p.m., 8 minutes before the sale was supposed to close, Priya texted Jason one line, "Walk away or be deposed." He replied at 4:01 p.m., "We're out." The escrow firm sent confirmation at 4:09 p.m. that all funds would be returned. Aunt Sumi tucked the email printout into my red folder like a kept promise. I woke up on March 10th with a throat that felt raw and a mind like a room where someone had rearranged the furniture. Aunt Sumi was there. She put the leather notebook in my hands. "Operation Wake First worked," she said. "You can rest now." I closed my eyes and felt the grain of the cover under my thumb. It grounded me more than the IV ever could. 3 weeks later, on April 2nd, 2025, I walked into our boardroom with a scarf around my neck and a voice I could barely trust. The room smelled like lemon cleaner. I carried the red accordion folder and placed it at the head of the table. Evan sat to my left with his attorney. I said one sentence before we began. "We will do this with documents and witnesses." Priya started with the chain of custody. She laid out the power of attorney, the hospital notes, the TRO, and the Penmark report. She displayed metadata from the forged PDF, including the 9:48 a.m. creation time while I was sedated. She read out loud the WhatsApp snippet. She moved neatly through New York Business Corporation Law Section 7017 about fiduciary duty. Then she closed the binder. "He knew," she said. "He did it anyway." Evan's attorney tried a different story. "This was a misunderstanding during an emergency," he said. "He acted in the best interest of the company." Priya slid a single-page memo across the table, dated March 1st, 2025. It was Evan's draft of new bylaws that would let any 2 directors approve a sale. My name was crossed out. He had been planning this before the accident. The room went very quiet. The board voted by written consent at 11:03 a.m. to remove Evan for cause. The cause was detailed in 6 bullet points. Forgery, attempted self-dealing, false statements to a counterparty, and violation of internal controls were the first 4. He was asked to return his key fob. He held it for 1 extra beat like it might sprout wings. Then he placed it on the table. My hands did not shake. Official channels moved slower. On April 14th, 2025, the district attorney charged Evan with 2 counts of forgery in the 2nd degree and 1 count of criminal possession of a forged instrument. He pled not guilty on April 18th. On June 30th, he accepted a plea to 1 count of attempted forgery and 1 count of scheme to defraud. He received 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and an order to pay restitution in the amount of $112,600 to Willow Works for legal fees and forensic costs. We also settled with Port Atlas. On July 12th, they agreed in writing to circulate a corrective statement to their investors and remove all reference to any offer to acquire Willow Works. They paid a $25,000 contribution to our costs. I did not need their money. I needed their admission, and I got it in 6 lines on their letterhead. Inside our company, the cleanup took months. I met with Human Resources and Finance every Tuesday at 2 p.m. We reviewed access logs, changed processes, documented approvals in a new system that watermarked every page. We wrote a policy that any emergency governance action requires 2 independent approvals and a call to outside counsel. We trained everyone. The interns asked the best questions. There were small wins that did not make the news. On August 8th, Kiana shipped her first feature, a route merge tool that saved our customers an average of 9 minutes per dispatch. She taped a printed map to her monitor and circled all the saved miles with a fat pen. "This is what we keep," she said. 2 weeks later, an envelope came to my house with no return address. Inside were my own initials, LP, cut from some paper and scotch-taped to a note. It said, "Sorry." I set it on my kitchen table and stared at it until the afternoon light went gold. I slid it into the red folder. Forgiveness is not paperwork. It sits there anyway. On September 1st, we held a staff meeting on the 3rd floor. The air was crisp. I brought my leather notebook and placed it on the table where there is no head. I stood. My voice was stronger now. "We are not for sale by force," I said. "We are not for sale without consent." I looked at the newer faces and told them the numbers. Revenue up 22% since March. Churn down to 3%. Hiring 3 engineers. Those numbers were not revenge. They were weather after a storm. The last time I saw Evan was at the courthouse elevator on October 3rd at 11:14 a.m. He pressed the button and glanced at me. He was smaller, like a shirt washed too many times. I said, "We have boundaries now." He nodded once. "I know." The doors opened. That was the last hook he threw at me. I did not take it. At home that night, I opened my leather notebook and wrote 2 lines on the first page after the hospital wristband sticker. I wrote, "I built a table with no head. Then I learned to sit at it anyway." I closed the cover and ran my finger over the crease where the spine is starting to soften. The symbol holds. The company does too. If you have ever had to defend what you built while you were too hurt to speak, I see you. Tell me where you are watching from, and drop your story in the comments. Subscribe if you want more receipts and fewer myths.